let's roll right into it. So, Matthew, I noticed that you're a dancer for a long time, ballet dancer, and like 14 plus years. And then all of a sudden you switch to do marketing and agency. And why?
Yeah, yeah. It is really interesting because obviously I was a professional ballet dancer. That's like the lore of my story. People are like, "Oh, yeah, they didn't see me dance or anything, but they see it, they sense it." I think what's interesting is how my training in ballet is so much of how it's like shaped my life and who I am as a person. A lot of it comes from that, how I think about standards, how I think about applying myself to my own work and career. It goes from what I've learned from my teachers when I was growing up. Unfortunately, I had a back injury that kind of sidelined me from being able to continue on. And so for me, I at the time I was already passionate about photography, loved making videos, and I was making really terrible vlogs. Like it's all up on YouTube. So just go further back and you can see it. It's rough. But I think for me, what I what I thought was really cool was like I had this other thing that I was starting to become passionate about. I was spending my time outside of dance, uh, doing videos, making videos. Like that's what I spent my time trying to learn how to edit, right? And so after I had to stop dancing, one, I needed to pay rent, but two, I had just accomplished chasing after one dream and one passion, and
Hmm.
I had the confidence that I could do that again. And I'm lucky that I had the confidence because it was more so like I had seen something through. I had seen something over a decade to get to this professional level. So I just kind of went with where my passion was, which is photography and videos. Now, I think as I was figuring things out, I mean, I'm talking like I'm doing food trucks, shoots, I'm shooting events. I'm trying to figure out how is this all going to
Hmm.
work
Hmm.
out long term.
Yeah.
But as I was doing it, I really loved marketing and copywriting and advertising. And I just realized that those two worlds just weren't connecting and that like
Hmm.
we need to connect those, right? Like my camera
Hmm.
people,
Hmm.
friends, they're not hiring
Hmm.
me. It's these marketing managers over here. But these marketing
Hmm.
managers, they don't know what production is, right? And so we need to kind of build
Hmm.
a bridge of those two things. And I felt like I was able to kind of talk the language of really deep in terms of the tech of camera techniques, but then also be able to talk about who's your customer, why are they buying, revenue, account structure, and bring those two things together. And that's kind of how it all kind of came to be. But it wasn't like, hey, I stopped dancing, I got this master plan, and, this is exactly what I'm going to do. It was more of a journey.
There's something you said there, Matthew, that I thought was really cool, and I feel really relate to that too. It's like um, you mentioned that, like when you do ballet dance, it's a fucking discipline. When you do ballet dance, that's like I know how that is. I tried to becoming a professional salsa dancer, so I trained for like 3 years.
Okay.
So I know how hard it is to do the craft, stay in the time, all that, right? It takes a lot. But something you said that really would relate to me is like you see it through, right? You see it through in a way that you know that if you keep coming back, stay on top of what you want to do and keep at your craft, it will improve, right? And that progress seems like it's giving you confidence to pursue the passion of like photography and like connecting that to the artistic world of marketing that seems like kind of drove you into that world.
Yeah, because, when I was starting dance for the first time, I'm learning what a plie is. You think I'm going to do a double tour and do all this other jumps and crazy stuff when I first started? No, right? And so I have seen in my life, I'm not even that old, but even when I was like 22, it's like
Hmm.
I had seen what it took to go from just learning what a plie is to just stacking in, getting better and better very slowly. Like it is, ballet is the most is the highest level of technique. There is the least amount of error in terms of any sort of dance form. Most other dance forms, there's a lot more you can kind of work within. There is techniques, of course, but this is the like most like specific in terms of the language, in terms of how it's being done. And then you're, so in terms of training, you're very, very diligent, but also the progress can be slow, right? Like we're talking years to get from 2 pirouettes to maybe 3 pirouettes, and then consistently going from 3 to 4 and having those jumps get higher and higher and doing all these things. It's like that is so much time of you practicing the same thing, doing it over and over and over
Yeah.
again every day. And so for me, it was just about like, let me just apply that to the next thing, right? But I also know, hey, I'm only in year one. What was I doing year
Hmm.
one when I was dancing? I
Hmm.
wasn't doing everything. So year two,
So
I
we're
got to
learning
start
the basic turn. Yeah.
exactly. And so it's just one of those things where I think sometimes we rush our progress of where we want to be, and it's good. Like you should have goals, you should have vision for where you want to go, but also
Hmm.
know that you got to stack in those wins, those learnings, those lessons and getting better. And I think that that's where most people kind of give up because they've not seen that thing through for a decade, right? I just got
Hmm.
lucky that I happened to like start something at 8 or 9 years old, see it through. And so, yeah, even though I stopped dancing at 22, I basically am like, I know what it takes to work at something for over a decade. Most people at 22 have never worked at something for over a decade, right? And so that is my advantage. That was my advantage, still is my advantage of just knowing what it takes to work at the same thing for a long period of time. And so I really just kind of applied that to my work now, which is just like I'm just going to do this for a long time and I'm just going to outlast people. That's what I did with dance. That's
Yeah.
what I'm going to do with,
Yeah. Dude,
advertising.
I love it. It not only is what you have, and it's also like a big one. Like it is such a big anchor, you know. I don't I don't think a lot of people have that kind of experience. But it's like when you actually consistently doing something every single day, there's no way that you're not gonna get there. That's something I really learned. As I think that's kind of really what I'm trying to say. Like I feel like really relate to what you're saying. Like that types of confidence, it's like allow you to calm down, to actually really look at something that really put some thoughts into it, which is something I'm really excited about creative. So like nowadays, people are just so rushed into creating more beautiful things with help AI, especially and all other tools. What do you see people? I mean, you run a very successful creative agency. What do you see as people do wrong?
Do wrong.
Yeah.
I think that people, I think that people are focused on quantity. I think with AI, you can definitely output more. I can do more scripts faster. I can generate more things faster. Um, but what I found is that usually you almost start to look at things very systematically. So if I can now do 10, 15 statics, I'm just going to do more, more, and more. But eventually, um, you're kind of just prompting things in the same way. And really, like when it comes to like the best moments in marketing, the best moments for brands, it's when they broke rules, not when they followed rules. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be doing those things. But the question is do you have a pocket in your creative system engine like as you're building more things to have new ideas because sometimes the new different ideas take 10x the time, but if you're optimizing for a certain style of content and always doing it and hey every week we need to get it out these amount of content da da da, and it's again not to say like you shouldn't have any sort of you know checkpoints and markers in terms of output, like there is something to be said about that, But I think that the problem is that so often people are going, it's easier to go that route. But then when they say, hey, the ads aren't working, it's like, yeah, because you've just built a whole workflow that makes 100 of the same thing slightly different. Whereas like what
Hmm.
you really need to be doing is like getting an out of the box idea and like having budget and time to allocate towards that new different idea that could completely not work, but also know that the benefit of pushing your team to be thinking outside the box is going to get you
Hmm.
different wins, right? If you're just so
Hmm.
focused on the numbers of it, you're missing out on like the art of it. And there's a balance, right? Like you can't be too artful where it's like, what are we even doing? But I think most performance marketers are not going to optimize for the art and creativity. They're optimizing for what they can measure. But sometimes the best things come from when they break that measurement. And I think that you need to be able to give yourself a bit of that of a pocket, a budget of time and energy that goes into that. And I think teams are too optimized for potentially the wrong things long term. It works, I think, in the short term, but then long term, they're asking themselves, wait, why don't we have any cool brand moments? It's like, well, yes, we're spending so much time trying to figure out how to get 100 of the same static ads. I don't know what else to tell you, you know?
Yeah, you just made some point that's really important. It's like when it comes to creative work, I would say almost 100% of clients that I work with, everybody is always chasing the metric itself, right? Because it's like performance. Like, why else do you do it, right? But you are saying that it's actually also as important to set aside budget for ideas. That's really what creative really means, right? You gotta also be willing to have ideas that might fail now, but have a potential to grow in the future. But if you only are focusing on the most immediate metrics, like, I don't know, impressions and some of the, those things you're looking for, you might miss the mark, right? You might just chasing what everybody else is chasing.
Exactly. And I think that like brand equals performance, right? It's not brand versus performance. And brand is about a relationship with the customer's relationship with a company. And that is hard to measure. How do you measure brand? How do you measure the strength of that? It is hard, right? And I think people always want to find like we want to have this black and white like data and like know like oh, this logically makes sense. The thing is that humans are illogical. They buy things illogically. They 95% of human thought is subconscious. The subconscious does not think in words. It thinks in emotions and in visuals. Like yeah, like the clothes that you bought, like they're functional. That's great. You want to look good. People are not going to say that out loud. They're not going to say I feel insecure about myself, but I
Hmm.
want to buy this, right? Like people are not going to say I'm insecure, that's why I bought this Rolex, right? They're not going to say that,
Yeah.
but that's
Hmm.
probably actually the thing that's driving them. And the thing is that they probably don't even know that because it's subconscious. It's not conscious. So how are they even supposed to be able to say that? So I say all that because it's like uh, oftentimes we're trying to measure and have this exact understanding. It's like, that's just not how we work as humans, right? And we're selling
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
humans. And so, like, we need to do things that, like, connect to them as humans and, you know, try a bunch of things that can build brand because you can look at some of the best brands and they're growing year over year without having to spend like if they're growing 40%, 50%, but they're not increasing their spend by 40, 50%, right? Some of them even bring spend down and they still grew. How? It's because they had brand, right? Like that growth is the brand itself, right? Like that is not because they spent more on meta. And it's because they took shots throughout the whole year to get there. And I just think that like oftentimes those shots take a different discipline and take a different way of operating. And so you need to be able to have both. You do need to have performance. Of course, like
Hmm.
duh, like
Yeah. Yeah.
you don't get to have brand if
So
you don't have money in the
let's
bank,
bring it
you
back
know?
even. let's bring it back even a little bit. So, like on the surface level, what do you find just practically this year we call hack your metrics. So like the very comfortable talking. What do you think metrics is? What metrics is completely useless these days?
Oh, jeez. Oh man. I think what's useless is number of ads. Um, because like I think people like to talk about like number of ads. And like look, we have a scope of work with their clients. Like and technically there's a number of ads. But if we're being completely honest, do they care if we gave them 2 ads or 100 ads? Or do they care that they got and hit their targets? They care that they hit their targets, right? And if you could do that in 50 ads, who cares if you could do it in 100 ads, right? So, like, the number of ads does not equate to performance. It doesn't. And sometimes it could even be worse for you, right? Because you're spending more on more ads, but you're not getting the diversity, right? So, like, optimizing for number of ads to me is like not a great metric.
That's really, yeah, I agree. I would even double down like number of changes even on that regard as well. Some people are, well, you didn't do anything, but like you don't need to. Like it's working well. Why do you want to change?
Yeah, you could say like iterations as well. Like I think for
Yeah.
us, like we've kind of gone away of because of the need for diversity, we've gone away
Mm.
from trying to keep iterating. We almost are just like taking the learnings and then building out a new ad. So like if I'm thinking about like that number of ad like metric, if that's like what you're optimizing for, really it's like, do you want 100 ads or do you want 50 very different ads, right? Like, so like there, I think sometimes numbers doesn't always, the quantitative numbers doesn't always hit the fact that it's still creative and there's qualitative parts to that creative, right? So you could have 100 of the same ads, like same looking, same kind of topic. That's not going to help you, right? But if you had 10 very different ads, that could actually be way better. And so that's where some of those metrics of from an operations standpoint is kind of like not always super helpful, because if you don't teach your team to have the nuance and the discipline of diversity of ideas, then they're going to optimize for the wrong thing, which is just to get the numbers out. And you can argue
That's
that
really key. Yeah.
having some discipline of like consistency can keep your creative motion going. I do agree with that. Like, you can't just wait until you're inspired to get ads. Like, you need to be outputting consistently. But
So pull me back a little bit. Like, can you walk me through? I can't help but to notice you have you invest a lot of time to build a system for your creative
Mhm.
process to ensure that the deliver everything is locked in so that there is like air for creativity, air for efficiency, air for impact. Can you maybe like dial it back and simplify this? Just kind of walk me through what is a typical life cycle, like how process for your agency to do the creative work for them?
Yeah, so, my belief is you need to uh, give, in our case, the strategists, who are the ones who are kind of ideating and writing, you need to give them space to create. And I think it's hard at times because you need to be delivering monthly on things but also creating that space. So I think that like it's about work design, so less so about so they're just like making sure we don't have a ton of meetings, making sure that we are efficient in a lot of other areas, like how we communicate with one another and all these things. Like, that's super important because that creates space for a strategist to go out for a walk and think and take notes and come back and write. And so uh I do believe that having kind of like monthly targets, like, hey, we're going to come up with 30 ads, it's like that allows you to have some structure. And it's good to have that structure. You should have that structure, right? But then if you can give within that structure space and time for your strategist to come up with those ideas, that's where you can allow yourself to have nuance and change. We try to have like themes that we want to go after, and then how do we break those themes that we're trying to test or do, and bring those into like the concepts and whatnot. But look, like the longer you work with the client, it is harder to come up with those new ideas. We become insiders. And so it's really on us to push ourselves to rethink, push ourselves to spar with one another on how we could do something differently. Um,
Hmm.
I think that ultimately, just to finish up on this, is it's about building that culture of we are going to do different things. We are here to take the net new different swings.
Hmm.
And I think what allows us to do that is the fact that we do shoot in person. We are creating content. So we're not just like, oh, you give us the footage, we can only do with what we've got. It's like we have the ability to come up with ideas. You want 5 people on camera, we can make it happen, right? So we try to have a space where execution is not our limiter, only our imaginations. And that I think allows us to have more of those interesting ideas and concepts that I think most of our competitors as an agency just won't be able to do. And I think that allows us to have that space to really think and be different and push ourselves to be different. Because
Are you
it's
guys
easy
only are
to
you
say.
guys only do creative?
And we only do
The,
creative. And that's another point is we're only
yeah,
doing
yeah. Because a
creative,
lot of
right?
company agency might do media buy plus creative, but sounds like you want to be like hundreds plus DNA like
Because
all
it's
in
so dang
there.
hard. It's so dang
Yeah, it
hard,
is. It
right?
is.
And every
Yeah.
all of our operational process
Matthew,
energy is about that.
I feel like this is the thing. It's like, like I study marketing, so like I got, this traditional marketing, branding, education, and you used to so admire all these crazy, crazy cool ideas and how people come up, people go deep, deep, deep down with the fun design, music, different visual cues, and just to get to that point cross, right? It's just like so much work and everything go behind some masterwork. And I think like nowadays it's so easy to create something that just another thing, right? It kind of really feel like it makes it even more important to go deeper and create really, really, really fucking good quality work, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that a long time ago that, these pieces of ads, they were these massive campaigns. And I think it was just kind of the times of you'd have TV, you'd run it on TV, everybody's watching TV, right? So things were very centralized in a lot of ways of where these ads would be placed. So it was a lot easier to kind of understand that. So you didn't need so many different things. Now you've got all these different platforms. You've got influencers, you've got creators, you've got, high end pieces, low end pieces, status. I mean, the list goes on about how many ads you're putting out, right? Like it's crazy. Now, that being said, you need all of that. But when you think about how do you break through, again, it goes into we don't want to lose that. There is something special about some of these other pieces that people are doing. And when you think about what is going to break through the noise, is it another creator video or is it going to be a really interesting idea that captivates the essence of your brand, still sells your product, but talks and has a format that is not being done by other people. And that's really the bet that I'm trying to take with Goodo is that you come to us and we're going to try to find new and different ways to talk about it comparative to how other people are doing it, right? And um it's not easy to do cuz you're going to strike out a lot. And you got to be able to have the confidence to keep coming up with different ideas, but when they hit, it can be massive. And we've seen that. We've seen ads be able to run for over many years because it's like it hits, it works, and it's spending millions of dollars. And so, you know, you're not going to get all of that type of ad every single month, but you got to believe in us in the team to say we're going to get that. We're going to find something that cracks. It's hard to do, but
Yeah.
that's the bet that I'm
And
taking.
it sounds like you're also creating like operationally also creating, a intentions that is not just chasing the obvious metrics so that you leave that room for actually to force that work to happen as well to create some process. What
Yeah.
are some of you talk a lot about utilizing your brief, and making sure that it's done well. And can you walk us through a little bit about like more kind of simple wise, like what is it? Why is it important? What do you use it for usually?
Yeah, so I've been recently talking a lot more about the brief because it's something that I'm seeing as really important and something that we're trying to get way better at. So it's more so, I'm not saying we've got this, perfect thing, but it's the thing that I think is most important because the reality is that very, very rarely is the person who's coming up with the idea the person who is executing on the idea end to end. There's probably somebody else that is helping you execute that idea. So even if it was creative strategist to editor, that is one other person. In our case, at times, there could be 5 other people, right? Because you've got the brief writer, creative strategist, you've got the producer, the person who is going to find the talent, find the location. Those are elements that exist, the props, right? That's creative decisions made by the producer, the videographer, the director, the editor. So you've got 4 other people touching this brief and this piece of content outside of just the strategist. Now, the strategist has a vision. They have something that they want to see exist into the world, right? Because they're looking at the data, they're saying, this is my bet. Now you need to make sure that you get everybody aligned with your bet, right? With the vision that you have. And they all have to make creative decisions. But if you are unclear about your own vision as a strategist, then you're going to get 4 different interpretations of that brief. And you might not be able to walk back certain decisions. So once it gets to the editor, it's like almost like, it's already been shot, it's been directed. Like that's hard to, all of a sudden change in post. Like you can't just fix everything in post, right? So the reality, yeah. So like I think for us, what we're kind of focused a lot on recently is we want to spend more time being very clear about what we're trying to get out of this brief and out of this video that we're creating and being really, really clear about that. Because that's actually going to save us way more time in the back end, right? Because the editor is not going to edit in a way that we don't like because we're already very clear about how we want the edit to be, right? So that's going to save us back and
Sure.
forth time
Walk me
there.
some concrete examples. Could you walk me some concrete examples that you would put there normally that people don't put there as brief?
Yeah. So the first thing that we do in a brief is we have a section called brief goal or angle, right? What do you want at the end of this, watching this video? Do you want the viewer to know and feel and understand about the product, the brand, etc., right? That is very important to be extremely clear on because if I'm reviewing a brief, I am judging it based on that, right? So if somebody's like, "Hey, can you review my brief?" I'm saying, "Okay, uh let me understand the vision. Okay, I agree that vision is a good vision. That's what we want, right? That's what we want out of this video. I just read your script. It does not get us to there." So that brief and angle part is so important, being very clear and obvious. Then, in terms of the actual brief itself, we've got examples. Now, don't just drop in one example. Why do you like that example? I like the editing. I like the pacing. I like how this person's talking on camera. There's so many elements when it comes to any piece of like video specifically. There's music, there's editing styles, there's cadence, there's a lot of things. So if you just give me a video, no context, it's like, do you want exactly that? What do you want from that? What's your vision from that? What inspired you? What are you taking from that? So being very clear about those elements that you really like, because that's that's going to help, again, those creative decisions made, throughout the way. Then you want to have things like, what type of talent do you want? What's their vibe? What's their energy? Okay, it's a 30-year-old girl. All right, there's a lot of different types of people that can fit that, right? So you got to be descriptive. What kind of style do you want them to be? What do you want them to look like? What do you want them to understand? What's their role in this world, right? Like, there are things that we want to help so our casting is better and whatnot. Then in the actual brief itself, like, now you have whatever the script is and all of the lines, and then you have all of the visuals, and you want to be descriptive, right? Because, like, you've got another videographer going to come and start building out a shot list from this. What exactly do you want? Do you want this a close-up shot? Do you want this a wide shot? So you got to be really specific. And even if you're not working with the production team, you're working with the creator, please still be specific. Then we have, like,
Do you even go like all these, like you like basically attach like the whole scene, like like the camera angle and like distance and lenses and like all this,
so
like you
our
go
our
like details.
DP will
Sure.
go in after, and he'll start putting that together. So he'll
Okay, got it.
interpret whatever the visuals are, and then he'll say, "Hey, we could use the 25 millimeter like lens, and we're gonna have this like lighting. Here's how we're gonna light the thing and whatnot." So, like, he does that. So he translates kind of like the strategist is not going to be as
The
technical.
scene into the visual language that they need for the shot to
Yeah.
be
It's like, can
executed.
we get
Okay.
something like this? And he's like, yep, that's a probe lens. We're going to use this lens to do this, right? Um, and then there's editing notes and whatnot. And so, you know, it's maybe it takes an extra 10, 20 minutes to put in the work here, but it saves so much time down the line when everybody's aligned with that vision. And you're going to get what you want because you are being very clear about what you want to get out of this. And I think that, like, oftentimes in work, just in general, most of the time, things just weren't clear. That's why clients get mad. That's why, like, you're not happy with an employee. You probably just weren't clear most of the time, right? Like, you weren't clear about what you expected from this. And the same is true with creative work. Like, if you're not getting the output you want, it's probably because it wasn't clear enough, right? And that goes back to the brief most of the time. So when people
So,
talk about
so Matthew, so
execution,
many chefs in the kitchen in this case, right? Everybody wants to get a piece of their ingredients advice in. How do you make sure they're all organized, and what system do you use to ensure everybody's feedback and performance, evaluation, like this, all of this are in a collaborative space?
there's a lot of chefs in the kitchen, but there's only one executive chef. And the executive chef is the one that builds the dish, vision of the dish. But yeah, you've got somebody who's just doing sauce, somebody just doing the vegetables, just doing the plating, right? So there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, but there's only one vision. And I think that's got to be very clear, right? So you've got to trust the other people that they're going to do their job and do it well and get good people to do that. But what they need to know to do their job well and correctly is your vision. So it's really on the strategist to be very clear of what they're looking for, and then let the my DP make the most beautiful thing possible within the time that's allotted and how he's interpreting it, and let him expand what that could be, right? Like, let his genius be genius, right? But he's not the one coming up with, here's exactly all of the shots in the script, right? Like, he is letting the vision come from the strategist. He is just going to execute that at a 10x level, and expand upon that vision. So I think if you think about it from that way, that's like what's really clear. And then when it comes to, oh, is somebody doing a good job? The question is like, was the vision clear? And if it was, and somebody missed on something, that's on them. But if the vision wasn't clear, then I think that they were doing it on how they were interpreting it, and it's on the strategist to make sure that they're clear next time. So I think those are the things that I'm looking at in terms of, how we're executing. And of course, we're looking at performance. Like, does this
So
add
walk me through
smell?
the
That's
performance.
important.
So there's always different stage of this piece, right? So like you as the, exactly for the company? Like, how do you judge success for your team? Like, what are some of the things that you measure?
So I think that we judge success probably like most agencies should in the performance space, right? So obviously every brand is going to be different. Every client is going to be different. So their success metrics, their North Star metrics are different. But what we should be doing is aligning our production to those North Star metrics, right? So because that's how they're going to deem, oh, did this work or not? Did this engagement work or not, right? So
Hmm.
there are times like with monthly performance creative, which is what our core service is, we're working with them monthly. We're looking at, okay, there's usually some sort of threshold that makes this like a winning ad. Whatever that threshold is, like we want to be hitting X amount of ads that we're outputting that month above that threshold. That's kind of our internal metric. If it's a project, right? Let's say we're doing a launch video or
Hmm.
like whatever, something like
So
more
sorry. So
managed.
those metrics you're saying earlier, were they like more like client title, client benchmark performance?
Yes,
Sort of like
yes.
these are the level we're trying to hit with just overall
Yeah,
portfolio
because
level wise and
it's hard because we're working with clients and some of their AOVs are really high and their buying windows are really long. So it's like I can't be comparing that to the same benchmarks as like a $50 product. So we are
mhm.
always trying
and
to
and not to
understand.
mention even like you don't control the media buy, right? So you could have someone who doesn't even know how to place this in the market.
Yeah, so we aren't doing the media buying, which is, sometimes that's fine, sometimes it's not. It is what it is. But our goal is we are trying to align on how they are running their accounts. They run it this way, okay, that's how they're going to deem success. I'm not here to like say that you got to run it differently or whatever. If they ask for my suggestion, I'll give them a suggestion. But our goal is you guys have been judging creative at for your account based on this. That's how we're going to look at it too, right? It's not going to change how we approach creative. It's not going to change our process, but it will probably be different on how it gets assessed. So I think that's important. And then if you have projects, it's like, I mean, this goes into the sales question. Why are we even doing this project, right? Like, why do you need a launch video? Like, what does success look like for you, right? Because it's not enough to produce stuff that just looks cool. You want people to know that you're giving them results. There's got to be something that they need, right? Sometimes it is a problem solution. Like we're launching a new product. We need to have assets for the website. Okay, like that might not be as performance heavy. But outside of some of those like more simple like brand shoots that are very much just like we need new assets or whatever, I'm always like thinking, well, what are you guys really trying to accomplish? Because creative is extremely important, not just for ads, but across the whole board, right? It's the language that we speak because even if I don't speak the same language as you, we can see the same thing and we can still feel the same thing. And that's the beautiful thing about video and photos is that it goes across anybody, right? Because remember, I said the subconscious thinks in images and emotions. And so we can together communicate through images, even if we don't speak the same language, right? And so that means that to communicate to customers, the imagery is so important. It can connect to people beyond the boundaries of your own language. So we
Mhm,
know that
mhm,
that's
mhm.
important. And if it's that important, we know that it can drive performance. And so when you're thinking, oh, I need this new content, you should be thinking about how does that relate back to your performance of your brand, whether it's your website conversion, your ads performance, your social, whatever it is, it's got to connect back to the business. And if you can do that, you'll realize that you should probably spend more money on creative. Most of the time, people
Mhm.
who don't want to spend more money on creative are just not connecting back to how important it is. They're like, I think I can get away with it. The people that spend money on creative are the ones that are winning. Like that's just point blank. If you look at any of the brands, everybody like looks at these brands. They're like, oh, these brands are so great. What do they have in common? They spent more. on creative than you did. They took more risks on spending more on creative than you did. It could be more on TikTok than you. It could be more on performance ads. Different brands for different reasons scaled, but they all scaled through some sort of creative, and they probably spent more on creative than you did. That's it.
Do you only work with very? I know your agency is huge. You only do like very big. Do you only do very big budget?
No, I mean, we work with seven-figure companies that are kind of growing and in that growth stage, and then eight, nine figures. So yes, there are, if I was doing less than a million in revenue, um, you probably shouldn't even have an agency, if I'm being honest with you. Like, that's just because there's product market fit that you want to find. You want to kind of find what channel's working for you. You want to start to champion that. Where I think agencies can come in is they can either take on what you're doing and expand it, so that it's not all on you, or you're able to get something different from that agency. But if you're trying to build a brand from scratch and you don't really have the messaging, any of those things, I'm like, I wouldn't even, like, if somebody called me and said, I would be like, you shouldn't get an agency. And that's from somebody who sells the services. I'm saying don't do that. Because it's not gonna help you. If you need a photo shoot or something, sure, like, we would do that, and I think that that's fine. Like, you could get a photo shoot done or something like that, or a video or whatever. But, like, to basically be sub a million, and then you're like, we're gonna ship off everything to another person and not really know how you're building your brand, like, it's still so early days that, like, I would really focus more on doing it yourself, to be honest.
Yeah, and a lot of them probably can afford to do it, like big production and like that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Like, there's stages of what you need, right? And
yeah,
so, like, you probably, most of the time, even if you think about, like, the budgets, right? All these people talk about so much about, oh, we need all these many ads. Don't listen to somebody who's spending like a million plus a month on Facebook. Yeah, they need a lot of ads, but a lot of ads in comparison to their spend, right? But if you're spending only $10,000 a month, you probably only need like 5 to 10 ads. Like, you don't need to be like, oh, how am I going to come up with 100 ads? Like, your budgets don't scale to test 100 ads anyway, right? So, like, a lot of times most people stress out that they need more ads when they don't need more ads. Like, even if you are doing $100,000 in spend, 20% of that goes to creative testing. That's $20,000. Okay, then if you have $500 per test, then that's only 40 ads. You need 40 new ads
yeah.
on top of
No,
what
I
you
actually
already
think
have.
a lot of people probably don't even have $10,000 to spend. There's a lot of
Yes,
advertisers have to work with way lower budget and have to
exactly.
figure out some way, but still apply a lot of really good principle that you were talking about. Matthew, I want to spend the next few minutes kind of maybe bring back to kind of how do you stay creative? So like for you like run an agency with a bunch of creative staff and like how do you know they're creative? Like creative is such a subjective thing. Like how do you know someone is creative and how do you stay creative?
Ooh, two very good questions. Um, well, let me walk you through something that I've done. We've been when we're hiring for a strategist. After the initial interview, we'll do a brief, and then we get that brief back, and I'm asking them questions about things. Um, Honestly, very rarely am I gonna get like, I'm not saying this in a bad way, but getting really good writing can be hard. It's not impossible, but what I'm looking more for is, was the idea interesting? Because if you think about our process internally, right? Like, if the idea was interesting, but the script wasn't maybe as strong, we can always go back and forth to get it strong. But coming up with an interesting idea, that is way harder to do. Um, or, for example, people might be very, very analytical, And again, they're like maybe trying to methodically, like, oh, I looked at the competitors, I did this, and like it's like a slight variation of something. That's fine. Like that's good. Like we need to do that. We do that too. But if it's like, I want you to come up with the craziest idea, like if somebody comes up with an idea that I'm like, that is interesting. Like I don't even care about how it was really fully executed, like in terms of like how the brief was fully written. Like if I'm like, we can work with that idea, getting different ideas, different ways to communicate something, that is what I'm looking for. And if you can do that, you can deliver that, I can teach you everything else. I can teach you data, I can teach you all of those other things. That's actually fairly easy to teach. But to teach how do you come up with ideas, that's hard. That's, I'm not saying it's unteachable, but it takes reps and it takes somebody who can see inspiration and be like, what if we communicated it in this way to do this, and we grabbed this idea and we did it in this format, and now I've got, whatever this thing. That's harder to do, right? Like I can teach that. I have taught that. But if somebody has that innately, oof, that is I think really special, because a lot of the other things, like the performance side of things, you can come into play. You can always be like, hey, I want you to write more about the product, right? Maybe the script was a little bit shorter. Okay, I would just prompt that person, write it longer, go deeper, but this idea is good, right? And so like that is what it's what I'm looking for, is people that can have good ideas. You can always coach everything else. For myself, how do I stay creative? Man, I think it's a journey. I think, like the best thing you can do is just like, if you are, especially in advertising, a lot of times people want people to work like all the time, right? The reality is like you're talking to people who are consumers. They're out in the world. What do they watch? They're watching reality TV. They're watching, sports. They're hanging out with their friends. You can't relate to those people if you ain't with them. How can you speak to them? How can you motivate them to buy a product if you don't even hang out with them, if you don't even know the life that they are living? So, in my opinion, you got to go out and make sure you're living life. Because then, if you're living life, you're going to be that much more equipped to speak to the people who are also living that life, right? So, like, I've now become a dad. My son's almost 2 years old. I now have an insight about being a parent, and I can speak to that. I have my wife, and I can learn and glean ideas from her being a mom and being a wife, and the things that she's buying and thinking about and talking about, right? Like that's information that I can now use to go and be creative somewhere else, right? But it's like you got to live life to be inspired by it. People talk a lot about taste, right? They're like, "Oh, you need taste." Okay, well you got to go look at some art to have taste, right? Like you got to go and experience life and see things. You can't just like have some sort of like AI markdown file of what taste is. That goes back to the ideas. It goes back to the things that are gonna truly cut through the noise for a brand is that je ne sais quoi. It's hard to even like put into words exactly what it is. It's that zhuzh, but the zhuzh ain't coming from you being a formula.
You really have to live it. I really feel like that really is like back to
100%.
what we're saying at the beginning, right? Like I think you got this 14, 15 plus years of beautiful ballet, the form, the essence of that practice you lived in, that elements probably nutrition a lot of ideas that, pushing into other domains. And one thing you mentioned I really love is that like when you want to market something to some people that is approachable, you really, really, the creativity really comes from live fully of that life so that you would know what is all the visual cues they like, what is the sound like, what is the type, like you gotta live that. And I think that's where I want to live the last segment on this sort of AI versus creativity, right? Because I think it's we are at this point where, you go to Foxwell Group as well. Like there are people constantly pushing what the next thing you can do with AI for some of this, right? And I focus actually a lot less on product. I focus a lot on service-based industry where that's even to me, it's even AI has the role is even less to me. It's like I feel there's this push so that people are so naturally connect with authenticity nowadays. If that means poorly executed, but no AI involved, but just have some substance, say, like just being that authentic in my field. And I just really feel like, how do you see AI play in the creative world?
Yeah, look, I'm extremely excited about creative with AI. And I think my take is a bit different, which is um there's a lot of energy that goes into making something, right? Um
Hmm.
and at times, because of all of that coordination that has to happen, it takes up a lot of time. And sometimes it rushes the thinking process. But what if I could take, let's say, the process, shrink it down 80%, right? Like there's still manual things you got to come up with, but there's a lot of things that you could maybe shrink down in terms of the time or whatever. That space that is created from some of that stuff, some of that process being shrunken down, that is where we as humans get to be creative. And in fact, it's great because now I can have more time to be creative. So instead of me and having my strategists have to spend so much time pulling data from this website and that website and condensing it and putting it, now they spend their time saying, how do I use that data? Right? So instead of us crawling the websites of 5 competitors plus our own, we could say, well, now we can spend more time on saying what's unique about the product. Let's go deeper with that, right? So we're not saying, we're not really taking the approach of like everything's hands off and automated. We're actually saying we're just going to spend more time on the things that we believe are more important because we don't have to do the other things that aren't as important. And if again, like we really think about what is going to be successful in advertising and marketing, it is being able to, it always has been, it always will be cutting through the noise, right? So there's a marketing technique that comes out. If you are there early, then you're going to get the gains, but you're going to start to see people are going to make the same styles of videos and things like that. Okay. So our goal is we're not trying to build systems of copying. We're trying to be the new thing, right? So you can now generate images and be like, I want to make a vlog like Casey Neistat. Great. Casey Neistat was an original. He came up with the idea of how he wanted to do that stuff. Did everybody copy how he vlogs? Yes, and I did too, and that's fine. You have to steal to learn, right? Like that's fine. But somebody's got to come up with the original thing, right? My goal is to compress the time so that we are the originals. They come to us for the original ideas. If you want to go and get the ideas just remade, go to some other shop. But if you want something that's going to be different and bold, that's what we're trying to be. And AI is going to allow us to compress a lot of time, to expand way more time for us just to sit and be like, what's the best idea? And then now, if you think about execution, execution becomes even easier as well. So we are really not limited by what we can do because now we can do what a 3-person animation team can do with 1 person, right? And now that opens up even more ideas because the barrier of execution is lower. And so again, ultimately, what's going to be, why would you hire Goodo Studios in 5 to 10 years? We come up with good ideas. That's going to be the difference, right? That's really it.
I love that. I think I really love that, man. I think you said it so well. Like I couldn't even re say it anywhere better. Like AI, there's so many people are doing it wrong, and we know it. And people are literally just say, ChatGPT, create an app for me, do this, right? And that's not what you're talking about here. Like what people really need to figure out. This is something I really love, and what you said there is like really focus on what AI is really good at, like process, like taking out these repetitive things that used to take a lot of manual process out, right? Even the execution, like even camp, like all that out of there is just so that in essence, everyone can just really do the goddamn thinking of what needs to be creative, like the essence of the ideas, so that we're not just becoming a scale or not a copycat.
Yeah, and I think that's like, you can either ship like off your whole like ideation phase to somebody else or like to ChatGPT, or you can use the tool because it's a tool to be better at coming up with ideas. And so, my goal is to compress a lot of what's going on in our studio so that there's really most of the time is just coming up with ideas, and really playing with that and having time to spar back and forth with, is this the best idea possible? um, ultimately, like, we talk about these things. It's harder in practice, right? You have to be able to still hit deadlines. You've got to be, it's not just this like we're just sitting on a couch and being like, so guys, what are we going to come up with next? But there is something special about having, I think, that harmony between, output but also creativity. And that takes nuance. It takes, I think, leadership like myself to make sure that I'm leading the studio in the way that we can balance those two things. Sometimes we got to get things shipped, and we've got to cut out all of the extra stuff. Does that extra stuff drive performance? Yes or no, right? And like really teaching those decisions to get things moving, because there is something of value to getting things out, right, and shipping things. But there's also times where you need to know when to expand, when to break your own process, so that you can come up with the best idea. And I think it's my job to give people the ability that they know that they can take that risk. Because oftentimes it's the leadership that's pushing down on, we need these numbers, we need this output, when in fact, like, we should be creating as leaders space for our creative team to say, hey, you know what? You should take 10x the time to do this one idea. I don't think that most leaders are trying to do that, but if you could do that, what would come out of it? I don't know, but probably something better than 10 of the same looking statics, right? So I
Yeah,
think as
totally.
leaders, that's the thing that I need to work on in the next 5 to 10 years, is how do we balance process, but also giving people the ability to break it, to come up with the best idea. Because again, clients care about performance. That's what they want. They want more money. I want to make them more money. And that doesn't always happen because we evenly gave them the same amount of ads every single month, right?
Yeah,
It
no, I
came
love it,
because
love it. I
of
think,
the ideas.
dude, let's just end on a high note here. I think people needs to hear this. It's like what a refreshing for us. Like, especially in the AI world, people are just so dry by that more immediate next metrics, and I love the fact that you're staying strong, firm, frontier, take the hit, like people, there needs to be thinking like that, especially we're in right now. So with that, I'm gonna actually end right here. Dude, thank you so much, man. You're so awesome.
Yeah, no, Leo, I appreciate you big time. Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about this, and thanks for creating a space where we can talk about these things, because it's always a fun time.